It's Tuesday, February 24th, 2009, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville. Produced and distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C., this is your NORML Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Welcome to the most popular podcast regarding marijuana in all of America and all the world, featuring interviews with scientists, politicians, doctors, prohibition policy activists, regular cannabis consumers, musicians, and NORML staff and NORML's board of directors, along with music and comedy no other podcast can offer. You can always find out more about our show at our website, stash.norml.org, and continue the education and conversation on our blog as well. We're ending marijuana prohibition with education, one listener at a time. The podcasting and blogging technology for the NORML Daily Audio Stash is provided by Red Aphid Interactive Media. For your professional web design needs, visit redaphid.com. Good day, Stashers. Welcome to the podcast. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Never in my life have I been so busy as since I've become a professional pothead. Last night I was up pretty late editing video for the Oregon NORML cardholders meeting. This is for a presentation that our executive director, Madeline Martinez, is giving for the University of Central Florida down there in Orlando. She flew there this morning, so that meant I had to stay up last night and put video together. And this morning, after 4 hours of sleep, I got to be on a little videotape myself. I was taped for a local news and affairs program on our Portland CW affiliate. This show will be airing this Sunday at, I believe, 6:30 in the morning in Portland, Oregon. The topic was the legalization of marijuana, and this is one of those point-counterpoint type of shows. Unfortunately, the host was unable to find anyone who was willing to stand up for prohibition. So, in a fit of comic genius, he decided that the prohibition would be represented by a sock puppet. That's right, yours truly got to debate a sock puppet on drug legalization today. I dare say I won the argument. Before we get to our hemp headlines, I want to let you know about a press release from the Marijuana Policy Project. On Tuesday, March 3rd at 1 p.m. Eastern in Washington, D.C. at the National Press Club, they'll be releasing a new report called False Positives Equal False Justice. And this just shows that the most widely used field test for identifying marijuana, as well as the majority of other drug test kits used for arrest and prosecuting by law enforcement officials, have unacceptably high rates of rendering false positives. We'll report on that press conference next week. Now, coming up in your daily audio stash today, we've got our Government at Work segment, so we'll be talking to Dan Lin from Illinois NORML and the introduction of House Bill 2514 and Senate Bill 1381, twin bills to make Illinois one of the medical marijuana states. In our daily Toker Tunes brought to you by MarijuanaMusicAwards.com, we bring you a short interview with Rich Hardesty and his song, All My Friends Are Stoners. Those of you who've got the Totally Baked DVD will recognize that song from the end credits of that movie. And in our second interview segment, we're going to go all the way to the island nation of Japan and speak with Taku from THC Japan on the burgeoning Japanese cannabis culture. It makes me want to grab a bamboo pipe and a little bit of sake and say, Konnichiwa. It's time for your NORML Daily Audio Stash.
Hello, I'm Paul Stanford from the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation, or THCF. Medical marijuana is legal in 13 states today, and THCF has clinics in 8 of those states. Our doctors help qualified patients obtain an authorization for medical marijuana in their state. Patients are eligible for medical marijuana with a history of either severe chronic pain and or nausea, cancer, AIDS or HIV, hepatitis, glaucoma, seizure disorders like epilepsy, chronic muscle spasms such as multiple sclerosis or asthma, neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, and gastrointestinal intestinal disorders like IBS or Crohn's disease. If you or someone you know has one of these conditions, our doctors will help you obtain a permit for medical marijuana. THCF Medical Clinics has offices in Washington State, Oregon, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Nevada, Montana, and now Michigan. Call 1-800-723-0188 or go to the web at hemp.org or 1-800-723-0188.
Now it's time to take a look at the latest stories about marijuana from news organizations across America and around the world in our NORML daily audio stash, Hemp Headlines. This is your NORML weekly legislative roundup. California. On Monday, State Assemblyman Tom Amiano introduced AB 390, the Marijuana Control, Regulation, and Education Act, the first bill ever in legislature to legalize and regulate the commercial production and sale of marijuana in California. You can see local, network, and national media coverage of this effort through links at NORML.org. And if you live in California, please visit NORML.org to contact your state assemblyman and urge him or her to support AB 390. New Jersey. Lawmakers took a major step on Monday toward making New Jersey the 14th state to legalize the medical use of cannabis. Senators voted 22-16 in favor of Senate Bill 119, the New Jersey Compassionate Use Medical Marijuana Act. But this battle is only half over. Members of the New Jersey Assembly must also vote on the issue. If you reside in New Jersey, please take a moment to contact your members of the State Assembly and urge them to support Companion Bill A804. You can further support this effort by contacting the Coalition for Medical Marijuana New Jersey at cmmnj.org or NORML New Jersey at normlnj.org. Montana. Senate lawmakers in Montana today voted 28-22 in favor of Senate Bill 326, which seeks to expand the state's medical marijuana laws. As introduced, Senate Bill 326 expands the number of qualifying conditions for which marijuana may be legally recommended, increases the amount of marijuana a patient may legally possess, and prohibits employers and landlords from discriminating against medicinal marijuana patients solely because of their medical status. NORML thanks all of you who took the time to support this important measure, which now moves to the House for consideration. For more information about this and other statewide marijuana law reform efforts in Montana, please contact Montana Patients and Families United at mtpfu.org or Montana NORML at montananormal.org. Washington State. Last week, the Senate Judiciary Committee approved Senate Bill 5615, which seeks to reduce the penalty for minor marijuana possession offenses to a civil fine of no more than $100. You can listen to audio from the hearing and the vote at the NORML Daily Audio Stash at stash.norml.org. This proposal now goes before the Senate Rules Committee, which must take action on the bill to put it before the full Senate. Tell them to do so by visiting our activist alerts at norml.org. To learn about additional pending legislation in Alabama, Connecticut, Illinois, Minnesota, Missouri, Oregon, Rhode Island, Tennessee, and Texas, please visit NORML's Legislative Action Alerts page through the large map graphic for activist alerts at stash.norml.org. Former Atlanta police sentenced to 5 to 10 years for killing 92-year-old in drug war corruption cover-up. Atlanta, Georgia. A former police officer tearfully apologized Monday for his role in an elderly Atlanta woman's shooting death during a botched drug raid, and another told a judge he prays daily for the victim. Ex-cop Greg Jr. said before breaking down on the witness stand, quote, "I used to think I was a good person," end quote, during a sentencing hearing in the federal courtroom in Atlanta. Jr. and two other ex-officers, Arthur Tesler and Jason Smith, faced prison in connection with the November 2006 drug raid that left 92-year-old Catherine Johnston dead in a hail of gunfire. Smith, Jr., and Tesler pleaded guilty to federal charges of conspiracy to violate civil rights, resulting in death. Smith and Jr. also pleaded guilty to state charges of voluntary manslaughter and making false statements, and Smith admitted to planting bags of marijuana in Johnston's house after her death. Tesler was convicted on one state count of making false statements for filling out an affidavit stating that an informant had purchased crack cocaine at Johnston's home in a crime-plagued neighborhood near downtown Atlanta. The informant denied having been to Johnston's home, leading to investigations by local authorities and the FBI, and the breakup and reorganization of the Atlanta Police Narcotics Unit. Police said Johnston fired at them with an old pistol during the raid, and they shot back in self-defense. Johnston's one shot went through her front door and over the officers' heads. They responded with 39 shots, hitting Johnston 5 times. Assistant U.S. Attorney John Peter Kelly said, quote, "Her death was the foreseeable culmination of a long-standing conspiracy in which the officers violated their oaths of office." End quote. The officers regularly swore falsely to get warrants and make cases, he said. Federal prosecutors said officers cut corners to make more time for lucrative side jobs providing additional security to businesses, often while on duty, and for cash payments. Excuse me, CNN and other mainstream media outlets? This was no botched drug raid. That makes it sound as if the police were executing a lawful warrant for a serious crime and whoopsie, somebody made a typo on the address of the warrant. Kathryn Johnston was shot to death during a premeditated, fraudulent raid by crooked cops enabled by drug war corruption. This is the natural result of domestic militarization of police and the inevitable corruption prohibition generates. Kathryn Johnston is one of many citizens who've been killed or had their lives drastically altered from an unnecessary SWAT-style raid. Some are innocent victims like John Adams, Willie Hurd, and Reverend Asseline Williams, who die in drug raids at honestly mistaken addresses. Some are guilty victims like Bruce Lavoie, Scott W. Bryant, and Delbert Bonar, whose doors are kicked down by black body armor-clad disguised police with automatic weapons throwing flashbang grenades in the middle of the night, only to find a few grams of marijuana for personal use. There is no need to kick down citizens' doors. A suspect can be watched, tailed, and apprehended in broad daylight, away from the suspect's family. Even if a suspect is known to be armed and dangerous, coming at him full force in his lair just endangers the neighborhood. The only purpose in these no-knock paramilitary drug raids is to instill terror in the population. It's all about sending a message that we're tough on drugs and showing the criminals who control the market that the cops are the baddest gang on the street. I'm happy to report these lowlifes who found their rent-a-cop moonlighting gigs more important than civil rights and an old woman's life will be spending the next few months behind bars learning important lessons of respect and empathy. A federal judge has sentenced 3 former Atlanta police officers to prison terms in connection with a botched drug raid that left a 92-year-old woman dead. Jason Smith, Greg Jr., and Arthur Tesler pleaded guilty to a charge of conspiracy to violate civil rights resulting in death. U.S. District Judge Julie Carnes sentenced Smith to 10 years in prison, 3 years probation, and a $100 fine. Judge Carnes sentenced Jr. to 6 years in prison, 3 years probation, and a $100 fine. Judge Carnes sentenced Tesler to 5 years in prison and 3 years of supervised release. The judge also ordered all 3 men to split the funeral costs of nearly $8,200 for Kathryn Johnston, who was killed by police gunfire in the November 2006 raid. In the sentencing hearing, Judge Carnes said, quote, "The sentence must be tough enough to send a message to other police and also mend the confidence of the community," end quote. While she indicated the 3 men did eventually cooperate with authorities, she said, quote, "This is a wrenching process for everybody," end quote. Judge Carnes was also very critical of the Atlanta Police Department and indicated the shooting was due in part to pressure on police officers to make drug arrests. The U.S. Attorney's Office had recommended that Smith serve about 12.5 years in federal prison and Jr. and Tesler serve about 10 years. Prosecutors recommended that Smith and Jr. received reduced sentences because they cooperated with authorities. I'm sad to report these lowlifes will be spending less time behind bars than most federally convicted growers tending large legal medical marijuana crops in California.
This is Jet Baker reporting for NORML's Daily Audio Stash. I attended Texas NORML's first ever Cannabis Activist Boot Camp on Sunday, February 22nd in the ATX. That's Austin, Texas, y'all. On a beautiful and quiet, clear 70-degree Sunday, Texas NORML was able to fill to capacity the brave new bookstore in the heart of the UT Drag. It was standing room only for the 4-hour multimedia boot camp. The whole day zipped by exactly on time per the agenda. Each speaker was informed, prepared, and passionate about their topic. Public Relations Director and tireless cannabis activist Brad Ernst started with Cannabis 101. Chuck Miller, the Veterans Liaison, presented How Hemp Can Save the Planet. Assistant Director Phil Redmond walked us through medical marijuana, cannabinoids, advances in research, and Texas strategies. Jack Finkel, the volunteer coordinator, spoke on self-empowering volunteers. Mac, Texas NORML's resident artist, spoke on sustainable and alternative fuels and energy. Treasurer Shelley York gave us the legislation updates, and then Courtney closed the day with showing us how to reach out and extend the Cannabis Reform Network. I asked Josh Schimberg how the whole event came about. He said that the day had been planned and discussed for many, many months in advance at Texas NORML officers' meetings and at the Texas NORML meeting. Congratulations, y'all. It was a huge success. The months of planning sure showed. Texas NORML is cooking on the front burner. This is Jet Baker reporting for NORML's Daily Audio Stash.
Well, thank you, Jet. Keep on sending those tracks in from the ATX, y'all. And for you stashers out there, if you'd like to report on an event or news story in your local area and be one of our cannabis correspondents, just send a 2-minute or less MP3 file to stash@norml.org with the subject line, Cannabis Correspondent. And if we can use it on the air, we'll be sure to put it in the hemp headlines.
Dear Mr. President, last November you were elected on a platform of change. You promised the country reform on the political system. Well, let me tell you what NORML.org and many other Americans want changed. Marijuana laws. It was estimated that America made its 20 millionth arrest for marijuana possession this year. You want a real economic problem? How about the amount of money being spent on simple possession arrests? Incarcerating people costs taxpayers around $23,000 per year, and NORML estimates that up to $10 billion a year are spent on enforcement for mostly nonviolent offenders. Now let's imagine what would happen if marijuana was legal. Not only would we save billions each year on enforcement, but imagine the economic boost. You would produce jobs growing, selling, and tax dollars coming in from the regulation of marijuana. I'm not saying let people loose to sell on the streets. Put government regulation in to tax and control its sales like alcohol. Street dealers are the problem, not a guy with a gram in his pocket. Put in harsh punishments for people who drive under the influence, and stop punishing people who enjoy marijuana safely in their home. Mr. President, if you really want change, legalize marijuana.
Tuesday is our look at your government at work here at the Audio Stash. While the inevitable re-legalization of cannabis hemp will have to happen at the federal level, the steps leading to that destination take place at the state and municipal levels. We focus in on the initiatives, bills, and amendments regarding cannabis across all 50 states, and what activists like you are doing to enact a positive reform to our cruel and outdated marijuana laws. If you're working hard to make an impact in your city and state, please email us at stash@norml.org and let's share your local efforts with the worldwide cannabis community. Together, we can affect our government at work.
Afternoon pollution rises high into the sky. How can we still deny the truth?
Time for more government at work, and we looked to the Midwest in the last election where the state of Michigan passed medical marijuana in every single county. The state of Minnesota is moving forward on medical marijuana with its bill making it out of committee. And we're going to stay in the Midwest and take a look at the state of Illinois with Dan Lin, the executive director of Illinois NORML. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Russ. It's always good to be on the show.
So in Illinois, we're looking at a medical marijuana bill. There's a pair of measures, one in the House, one in the Senate. Why don't you just tell our listeners a little bit about these bills?
Well, they're identical twin bills. The first one is introduced in the Senate. That's Senate Bill 1381. And in the House, it's House Bill number 2514. Both of them are titled the Compassionate Use of Medical Cannabis Pilot Program Act, and they're a 3-year pilot program. It would allow for patients with these pretty standard conditions that are used to treat, or medical cannabis is used to treat cancer, HIV/AIDS, multiple sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, chronic pain, muscle spasms. And we've had very little success getting these bills through the past few years, but we are gaining momentum, and we're very optimistic this year with those two bills that we're going to be able to pass that and protect the sick and terminally ill in Illinois.
Who are the sponsors on the House and Senate side, and does this break down by any party lines?
We do have bipartisan support. In the House bill is sponsored by a Democrat out of Skokie, Representative Lou Lang, and it's also co-sponsored by Representative Saviano, who is a Republican from the River Grove area. And then in the Senate, it's sponsored by Senator Hayne, who is a former state's attorney. And our hope is that being a former state's attorney, he'll be able to ease some of the concerns that law enforcement has and hopefully get them to stop actively lobbying against this bill.
That was something I wanted to ask you about, is if there is at this time any organized opposition to this movement, and what are some of the things your opponents bring up?
Well, every year the law enforcement community seems to actively lobby against this bill, and some of their arguments are that it sends the wrong message to children, and that this would be very susceptible to abuse, and it would end up being de facto legalization. And we know that those claims are untrue, and they're more or less fear-mongering these claims to try and get people to vote against this bill in the Illinois legislature. And I think with having a former state's attorney as the lead sponsor, it's going to be really hard for the law enforcement community to just throw these fear tactics out there without any support behind them, because being a former prosecutor and for the state's attorney's office, he knows how this bill will be enacted and practiced and what there really should be concerned about in the law enforcement community, and that's real crime. And if there are any abuses of this program, those people still would be punished. And the Senator Hayne has even come out and said he does not support full legalization for all adults. He just wants to make sure that sick people in Illinois are protected.
Illinois is a pretty diverse state, from, the urban landscape of Chicago in the Northeast to the great the southern areas of the state that are quite rural and agricultural. What obstacles do you face in getting this message across to the people, and do you find popular support for this among all manner of Illinoisans?
Well, illness doesn't know party lines or race or any other type of belief. People can get sick. And once when people are sick, they want to be able to use the medicine that works and that their doctor recommends. And as you mentioned, there is widespread support in the Chicagoland area. But then once when you get outside of Chicago in the collar counties, you get a little bit more of a conservative feel in those suburbs. And we have ran into some opposition there, getting some of the legislators to vote in favor of our bills in the past. But then once when you get down to the rural areas, it pretty much breaks down to party line. When we did have a full floor vote a few years ago for the medical cannabis bill, there was only one Republican who broke the party line and voted in favor of our medical cannabis legislation, and that was State Senator Dave Severson from the Rockford area.
So how do you plan on reaching out to these people in these areas who oppose the message of medical marijuana? What messages do you feel will best help them understand?
Well, we have a very active letter writing campaign, so we're targeting newspapers and publications in some of those rural counties and areas downstate. And then we're also going to start going to support groups for conditions that would be allowed to use medical cannabis for their treatment. So we're going to go and find where the hospitals are located in some of these rural parts of the state, and then find out what support groups those hospitals offer, and then try and get some of our volunteers and members to go to those support groups and try and rally up some support for this bill and this issue.
Let's look at the bills themselves and some of the language in them. It sounds as if they're somewhat built on the template that other medical marijuana states have adopted. What specifically do the bills call for with regard to limits or plants?
Well, they both allow for 7 plants and 2 ounces of usable cannabis, but at the same time, the Department of Public Health will use those guidelines to establish what they would consider a adequate supply of medicine for a 60-day period. So on the face, we do have 7 plants, 2 ounces available, but that could probably go up or down depending on what the Department of Public Health envisions as an adequate supply. But I wouldn't imagine that being dropped any lower than those 7 plants and the 2 ounces. And otherwise, the bill is, as you said, kind of modeled after some of the other states that have passed this legislation before. And, our reasoning for doing that is that these states that have passed this legislation that's very similar have these programs working without any widespread abuse. And we think that that's a good idea to try and follow their lead.
One of the problems that's cropped up in these existing medical marijuana states with laws similar are the protections of the right to work for medical marijuana patients. Does your legislation do anything to protect the right to work for patients?
It does have some language in there about employers not needing to allow patients to medicate on the job, but then it offers protections for the patients, saying that they're not technically impaired or under the influence of cannabis simply because there are metabolites found in their system. So it does, I think, a decent job of trying to both protect the patients who would be working for people as well as protect those employers who are going to have medical cannabis patients working for them.
Does your bill propose any sort of statewide registry or identification system?
Oh, yeah. The Department of Public Health would issue a registry card to the patient as well as their caregiver, and it also calls for medical marijuana organizations to exist, and those would serve as a dispensary for the patients who would not be able to grow or provide their own cannabis as medicine.
Now, nobody's crystal ball here is perfect, but with the progress made in Michigan from the last election and the kind of the theme of change that's going on in this nation at the moment, what's your best guesses here on politically how this bill might fare? If it made it through the chambers, would the governor sign it?
I believe so. Our sponsor of our bill last year in the Senate is now the Illinois Senate president, so I think he'll be able to use that power and influence to get this legislation through. And obviously the national spotlight has been on Illinois with our former governor being impeached, and the new governor, Pat Quinn, we have a little bit of a feel that he supports this issue, but we don't have any public statements to kind of hold him to yet, and we're working on that as fast as we can.
Exciting times in Illinois, and Dan Lynn is the executive director of Illinois NORML. If just as we wrap things up here, is there any way folks that want to help out can get involved with Illinois NORML and to contact their representatives?
Yes, they can get involved with Illinois NORML by going through the National NORML website, or they can visit our site directly at www.illinoisnormal.org. And if they wanted to contact their state legislators, they can call the state directory switchboard down in Springfield at 217-782-2000 and have the operator connect them with their state senator or their state representative and have the legislator vote yes on both of these bills, Senate Bill 1381 and House Bill 2514. And that's the best way that people can help and get involved.
That's great information. Dan Lin from Illinois NORML at illinoisnormal.org. Thanks so much for joining us again.
Thank you, Russ.
Hello, this is Webb Hubble. Life insurance is now available for responsible marijuana smokers. For years, responsible marijuana smokers have not been able to access affordable life insurance products. NORML uniquely supports cannabis consumers. 2 carriers have already agreed to offer all of their traditional life insurance products at all levels without excluding individuals who smoke marijuana responsibly. Help NORML and help yourself. If you've been declined for life insurance, are paying above market premiums, or simply want to know what now may be available in the way of insurance for marijuana smokers, contact me at info@mclaughlinonline.com or simply call me at 202-293-5566.
The battle to end adult marijuana prohibition can sometimes seem endlessly frustrating and impossible to overcome. One way we bond as a community and draw strength to continue is by rejuvenating our spirit through art and music. The Marijuana Music Awards exist to recognize those sonic artists in all genres of music who feature a ganja-friendly message to motivate and inspire all the cannabis community. Our daily Toker Tunes, brought to you by MarijuanaMusicAwards.com, feature the finest in blues, rock, jazz, hip-hop, rap, reggae, country, bluegrass, and dance music to enhance that 420 feeling and refresh all you stashers for another day on the front lines of the drug war. Enjoy this cut from MarijuanaMusicAwards.com and visit our blog at stash.normal.org to learn how you can vote for your favorites and enter your Toker Tunes in the 2009 Marijuana Music Awards. We got another guest joining us here for our daily Toker Tunes. Rich Hardesty is on the phone. Hey, Rich, welcome to the Stash.
Hello, how you doing, Russ?
I'm doing great, and Marijuana Music Awards sent us one of your songs here that was a winner in the 2008 American Marijuana Music Awards Song of the Year winner, the song All My Friends Are Stoners. Tell us a little bit about that song, and is this a typical kind of song for you to write?
Well, actually, I have hobbies, and I am a very serious singer-songwriter, but I like to escape, and I'm known to pull off campfire funny sing-alongs.
Mm-hmm.
They come naturally. This is one that came, I was leaving the studio of my producer, who was also my keyboard player, and I left the studio, and I had this thing on my mind. I called him on the cell phone, and I go, hey, Mosey, all of my friends are stoners, and he started laughing. Well, the next day I went back, and we actually recorded it, and then it ended up doing all kinds of crazy things.
Yeah, this one, people have probably heard the song if they caught that DVD Totally Baked. We promoted that last year on the Stash and interviewed the writer-director of that show. So people may have heard it there. Where else would they have heard the song?
The Pop's Greatest Hits, Lee Allen put that together. He's the producer, and that was the first time. That's what actually got the attention for the people with Totally Baked to get a hold of me. And so that was the first attention that All My Friends Are Stoners got. And then it dominoed into the movie Totally Baked. And the High Times magazine had a little section on it. And it just keeps going. Head to Australia.
Oh, that's great. So what are your plans coming up here as far as touring, or if people want to catch you live?
Well, they can always check me out at my website, which is richhardesty.com. I'm always on tour. I've been on tour for 18 years. And there's always a show somewhere. I just finished Key West and Boulder, Colorado, and doing some Indiana shows. I've got 2 CDs coming out here in the next couple months. My band has one, and then I've got a little solo project on the side. So the best way to find me is to look at my website, and then end up in Australia in May.
Oh, wow, that'll be a lot of fun. And so you mentioned how it's kind of a hobby of yours, and you kind of have these little campfire-y, singy songs that you'll put out. But for your other music, when we look at the total package for Rich Hardesty, what can people expect when they get one of your CDs or they attend one of your shows? What kind of flavor of music do you give them?
Okay, it's a feel-good show. That's what we call it. The fans have kind of coined it that. But, I mean, I think something, it's kind of like, Jack Johnson meets Sublime and Jerry Garcia and Bob Marley around a campfire. I mean, my band sounds like that. We're a surf, reggae, rock and roll band, and my keyboard player will throw in some hip-hop every now and then. So we're just feel-good cultural music.
Oh, that's great. That's a lot of stuff that I like that you mentioned in there, too. So I'm looking forward to the CDs. So we're going to play this song now here. And again, want to remind folks, it's Rich Hardesty, and you can check out more at richhardesty.com. And this tune is called All My Friends Are Stoners. And Rich, thanks for giving it to us, and thanks for joining us here on The Stash.
Okay, Russ. Have a great day.
This song goes out to Jerry Garcia and Bob Marley. All my friends are stoners, lighting up all of the time. Everybody has a mason jar. Can you guess what I put in mine? We all go to Jamaica once or twice a year to smoke big blunts with the Rasta man and drink ice cold red Stripe beers. All of my friends are stoners. We sit around and get fried. We're asking the president to legalize it so the whole wide world can get high. All of my friends are stoners until the day we die. When it comes to marijuana, we're the kings of the who, what, where, and why. All of my friends' parents are stoners, lawyers, teachers, bankers, and brokers. They all have ADD, so they roll up great big jokers. All of my friends are stoners. We sit around and get fried. We're asking the president to legalize it so the whole wide world can get high. All of my friends in Hollywood are laughing up at the sky. My friends in Indiana are in the cornfields getting high. We put it in our tea, we put it in our cake. We roll it up nice so we can get baked. We just can't seem to get our fill. We're wasting away in Marijuanaville. All of my friends are stoners. We sit around and get fried. We're asking the president to legalize it so the whole wide world can get high. Yes, all of my friends are stoners. We sit around and get fried. We're asking the president to legalize it so the whole wide world can get high. All of my friends are stoners, lighting up all of the time. Everyone has a mason jar. Can you guess what I put in mine? Oh man, shit. Here, that's great. Where's my purse? Who got my purse? Hey, don't let the dog out. Don't let the dog out. Close the door, hurry up. Don't let the dog out. Don't let the dog out. Dude, if the dog got loose, man, don't let the dog...
I'm Alan St. Pierre, Executive Director of NORML. Have you heard about the new super pot that's supposedly 20 times more potent than your father's Woodstock weed? Don't believe the hype. Marijuana's THC potency has always varied, even in the 60s and 70s. And the drug czar's numbers are full of, well, exaggerations. While no intoxicant is harmless, cannabis is non-toxic and far safer than alcohol. No matter how much you smoke, of whatever potency, you cannot die of a marijuana overdose. Potency is irrelevant anyway. More potent pot just means you smoke less of it, meaning less harmful smoke in your lungs. This is a prime example of harm reduction in action. Besides, the government already allows the prescription of THC pills. Its commercial brand name is Marinol, and it's 100% potent. Meanwhile, the federal government won't allow dying people to use natural marijuana, no matter what the potency? Does this make sense to you? Learn the facts about pot. Visit NORML.org today.
Usually here at the Normal Daily Audio Stash, we're paying attention to what's happening in cannabis culture here in the United States of America. We look to Canada a lot of times, and we even get out to Europe now and then, and Australia and New Zealand. But now we're going to go all the way to Japan, and we're speaking today with Taku, who is from THC Japan, the rapidly growing Japanese cannabis culture out there. The website is en.asayaki.jp, and we'll have a link to that. It's an English language link. We'll link to that at our blog at stash.normal.org. And Taku, thank you so much for joining us here on our show.
Yeah, thank you, Lars.
I just wanted to ask, this is something that's fairly new in Japanese culture, isn't it? This, the people understanding what hemp is all about and what cannabis is all about?
Fortunately, ordinary people don't understand what's going on in Japan, and of course about the Cannabis Control Act too.
Are there really stiff penalties, really strong penalties in Japan for cannabis use still?
Yeah, Japanese Cannabis Control Act actually provides less than 5 years imprisonment for just simple possession. Yeah, and less than 7 years for selling, even if it's for medical use. So, however, if it's a first offense, normally Japanese court gives the probation, but you still must be in custody at least for 20 days.
Wow. And you mentioned medical use of cannabis. Is there a growing awareness in Japan among the common people about the medical uses of cannabis?
Oh, not yet, unfortunately. But some Japanese groups is insisting it should be legalized. But unfortunately, Japanese Health and Welfare Ministry doesn't allow it.
Now, what do you say, or what do you think would be the influence of American cannabis culture on Japanese culture? Do you get a lot of reference to cannabis from our music, from our television, anything like that?
I think, in Japan, of course we do influenced by American culture in many ways. But, the thing is, most of the Japanese don't understand English at all. Mm-hmm. So the messages in lyrics, especially with fast beat like hip-hop, difficult to understand. Mm-hmm. So only some people in club culture or some other subcultures enjoy those movies and music, I think.
I see. Okay, and one story that we've heard, and I've reported a couple of times, have been in your sports, particularly in Japanese sumo, how originally it was a couple of Russian sumo, but now some Japanese sumo who have tested positive for cannabis. How has this scandal affected Japanese culture? Isn't the sumo kind of almost a religious sort of sport?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I think, of course, the scandal has been used by government to show what cost you should pay if you commit the stupid things in general. But this case has a kind of different aspect, which is conservative sumo association somehow used this case to kick foreign sumo wrestlers, like from Russia, out from their sacred community. So whatever it is, this case became a trigger to start many sports communities had THC testing for players. For instance, one rugby player from Tonga made another scandal, and now he got suspended from games.
I see. Now, looking back at Japanese history, has there always been a prohibition against cannabis or hemp, or is it like in America where in our past our forefathers used hemp quite a bit? I imagine it must be somewhat the same in Japan.
I think, historically, we use cannabis as a very sacred things, especially in a ceremony. We created some sacred ropes, like in a small wrestler who is called Yokozuna, who wears a very thick rope which is made by cannabis. But unfortunately, after 1946, this Cannabis Act is regulated. We cannot use it for even as an industrial use. So we have to make some changes to this situation as well.
How many groups and people in Japan are now trying to get this truth out about cannabis and its possible good uses and hemp and its industrial uses? I know you're with THC Japan. Is this something that's happening across the country, or is it specific to a couple of cities?
Okay, so our group's target is, the decriminalized recreational cannabis use. But as you say, there are some other groups in Japan whose target is to legalize industrial use of cannabis or its medical use. So recently, we organized new association named the Cannabis Policy Forum across different targets with these groups, and we'll start a new movement together.
That sounds good to get everyone involved together on this. And is this movement in Japan, like it is in America, one that's populated mostly by the youth, or how does it break down as far as the age of people who support cannabis in Japan?
Yeah, after the internet is popular among Japanese society, then mainly young people will be getting involved with movements. But the number is still not so big. So we should make a big movement with cooperating with other target groups too.
Do you have any help or support in the way of political organizations aside from these groups that are working for cannabis? I know, for example, in America, our political parties are both pretty against cannabis. Do you have any political groups that are for cannabis?
Yeah, fortunately not yet. But we keep calling to TV stations and newspapers to object to the exaggerated story on the harm of cannabis. And we also submit a written statement to political parties and the health ministry. So unfortunately, the response is terrible. However, every time someone is arrested and the story is covered on TV, the access to our website becomes quite increased. So now it made our website come to the second from the top of Google as a side effect.
Well, that's good. And I'm wondering also, here in America, we get a lot of what we call the gateway theory, where our opponents will point to the abuse of other drugs and say, well, it was the cannabis that got them started. Is there that similar theory in Japan that cannabis leads to harder drugs?
Yeah, exactly. So-called stepping stone story.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, most of Japanese scientists says cannabis can be the gate to the other hard drugs like speed in Japan. But I think the policy in the Netherlands shows it isn't true, actually. So we should advocate this Dutch policy as a good paragon in Japan too.
You know, it's amazing that the reefer madness seems to be the same in every language and every culture. They bring up the same tired arguments that have no basis in fact or science. And we're glad that you're over there in Japan helping to spread the word about this. Before we wrap things up, Teku, is there anything else you'd like to say to our American audience and anyone else around the world?
Yeah, thank you for giving me a chance, Ross. Yeah, in Japan, we don't have a donation culture. So our budget always has been a situation. So we are planning to sell our original goods on the donation campaign. So we'd like your audience to buy these goods in the future.
We will do everything we can to help you out. We'll post a link to the website for THC Japan. There is an English language version at en.asayaki.jp, and we'll have that all spelled out up on the website so we can find it quite easily. Teku is with THC Japan, working for the end of criminalization of cannabis in Japan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you too, Ross.
Thank you for downloading the NORML Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. We are produced by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. Our executive producer is Alan St. Pierre. Our deputy director is Paul Armentano. Our webmaster is Brian Judy. And web production is provided by Red Aphid Interactive Media. As always, you can catch up on the latest information about marijuana at www.norml.org. And you can interact and download from our Audio Stash blog at stash.normal.org. For everyone here at NORML, I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, hoping all your harvests are bountiful and your encounters with law enforcement are non-existent. We leave you today with another one of our cannabis quotes brought to us by Stasher Mr. Spoff. This one from Clarence Darrow, the famed attorney, who said, quote, "As long as the world shall last, there will be wrongs, and if no man objected and no man rebelled, those wrongs would last forever." End quote. Keep that in mind as we are rebelling and rejecting this wrong that has been foisted upon us in the 20th century, cutting off our ties as Americans to our heritage. Remember, this country was founded on hemp. Our founding fathers grew hemp. And the idea that we would be prosecuted and incarcerated for personal use of something that doesn't harm anyone else, why, it's un-American. Thanks for joining us here for the Daily Audio Stash, and week after week continuing to make the growing truth about cannabis the most popular marijuana news and affairs podcast on the internet. We'll see you tomorrow, and until that time, take care of each other, tokers.